returning to open session on June 6, 2017. At the table, we have members of the Personnel Board, David Pace and Samira Million, to give us an overview of a memorandum of agreement between the Town of Hingham and the New England Police Benevolent Association. Could you give us the highlights of the agreements?
Sure, I can do the highlights. David Pace.
Samira Million.
First off, I'd just like to say, recognize and say thank you to the officers from the Police Patrol Unit who represented the unit in the negotiations. John Marquardt, Nick Smith, John Walden, Dave Orlandi, Jerry Sullivan, and Mike Rockoff, who I think did a very professional, very thorough job in representing the union in this matter, and very appreciative of their efforts to try and come to terms with the town on a new agreement that I think works well for both the union and the town. There's a few key terms that I'll run through here. The first is just the term of the agreement, which we actually entered into two agreements. First is a one-year agreement running mostly retroactively from July 1, 2016 through June 30th, 2017. And then a second agreement, which is 3 years running beginning on July 1st, 2017. We agreed to a general 2% wage increase for the members of the unit, which is consistent with other unions in town as well as the employees of the town. As with the superior officers, we've implemented a fitness test where there will be an annual fitness test for the police officers. As it's optional, it's not mandatory. But if they do participate and pass the fitness test, which is based on national standards, they would be entitled to a $1,000 stipend, which we thought was a good encouragement for the benefit of the town to get, a fit police force, which is good for a number of reasons. We've also agreed, I'm just trying to hit the key economic terms, to a shift differential for those officers who work off hours, if you will, the 4 to midnight shift. Currently, we went from a 5% shift differential to a 6%, and for those who work the midnight shift, the graveyard hours, we agreed to a 6%, went from a 6% shift differential to an 8%, which is very consistent with our 20-town comparisons that we use when we're looking at these factors. We also agreed to two additional stipends for the officers, one for a field training officer of $500 and one for a firearms licensing officer for $500. And lastly, we agreed to what I would call a command shift differential, is when a patrol officer sits in place of a sergeant or a lieutenant for a full shift, they'd be entitled to a $40 shift differential. It was $30, so we agreed to a $10 increase in that, which again has been about 6 years at least since there's been a change in that, and consistent with a lot of the surrounding towns. So those, I think, are the key economic terms and the key terms of that. I don't know if anybody has any questions or we can give anything more.
Any questions from my colleagues or comments?
I'd like to thank the Personnel Board as well as the department for the work that was done to reach this agreement. I would also like to inform the members of the public, just for disclosure purposes, that my nephew is Jeremiah Sullivan. He's one of the Wage Committee members, but he and I have had no conversation at any time with respect to what's before us tonight.
Thank you. Karen?
No questions. Just, again, echo Paul's comments that thank the Personnel Board and the patrolmen for their hard work on coming to this 4-year agreement. I think it serves the town, and I'm hopeful that it serves the police department.
Chief or Deputy Chief, any comments?
No, I just
Glenn, you'll need to step to the mic if you could, please.
Good evening. It's always nice to get a contract settled like this, and I just want to, the patrolmen came in and were very professional about this, and I think they had a beautiful attitude moving forward for the future and future negotiations, so we were very happy with them. And it's always a pleasure doing business with the Personnel Board. Thank you.
Tongue in cheek.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Okay. If not, I'd accept a motion. Down at the bottom.
I'd like to make a motion to sign the Memorandum of Agreement between the Town of Hingham and the New England Police Benevolent Association, Inc., Local 70, effective July 1, 2016 through June 30, 2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'd like to move that we sign a memorandum of agreement between the Town of Hingham and the New England Police Benevolent Association, Inc., Local 70, effective July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next is approval of minutes for May 16th. Sally sent out revised minutes this afternoon with just one edit. We can call your attention to what that was if necessary. It was under the Harbor Master report out.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended, dated May 16, 2017.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any public comment on matters not on the agenda? Okay. 7:05, public hearing on the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 80 feet of 2-inch gas main in Brewer Beach Road. Hi, Harry.
Good evening. I don't believe the gas company is in attendance tonight,
Okay.
but I don't think it's necessary. I can answer most questions you may have.
Could you, we've gotten the paperwork of installing this gas main at Brewer Beach Road in Kimball. Could you perhaps just give us like the headlines?
Well, they propose an 80-foot main extension that connects at Kimball Beach Road, which is a public way, down Brewer Beach Road, which is a private way. So it's just a portion of the pipe that's going to be in Kimball Beach Road that needs your approval for a grant location. It's about 12 to 15 feet worth of pipe being put in Kimball Beach Road. The rest will all be private. It's needed to bring a new gas service to 20 Brewer Beach Road. They've been before the board in the past trying to waive the 5-year moratorium. So they've been waiting quite a while to get this gas service, and I think it's about time that, being the moratorium's up, that approval would be the right thing to do.
And Harry, are there any other homes where, that might be interested in this as well? Like on the plans, I see number 22 and number 56. I just want to make sure that if we're opening that road,
Well, if they had a hookup, it would come off Brewer Beach Road and not off Kimball Beach Road. And this main could be extended for any further, people that would like to hook up in the future. Anyone who wants to hook up off Kimball Beach Road, there's an existing gas main that goes all the way through Kimball Beach Road.
So 22 would hook up on Kimball Beach Road, is that what you're saying?
I believe they would be. I haven't really looked at
Okay.
the plan that specifically, but they probably would have an option now. I mean, this 2-inch gas main would be plenty of gas in there to supply additional homes, I believe.
Paul, any questions? Are there any questions or comments from the audience?
I guess that was my question as well. We've got 72 and 74, so it seems like they would come around and hook into this piece of pipe, gas pipe, right?
I believe so. I mean, the gas company would have to answer that more specifically. I mean, they look at loads, and access to the burner and where they have to hook the meter up.
Okay.
Question, could you please come to the microphone and identify yourself by name and your address, please? Thank you.
Hillary Martin, and I live at 86 Kimball Beach Road. So which houses and where would this digging be done? I didn't even know this was...
Right at the intersection of Brewer Beach Road and Kimball Beach Road.
So the Brewer Beach Road, does that go down to the Granatinos?
That's
property?
correct. That's correct. And it's only a small portion of the road. I mean, it's not even going to take up one full travel way. It'll only be taking up maybe a quarter point of the one travel way.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be much, interruption of traffic going
All
through
right, so
there.
right at the top of the hill.
And the work shouldn't take more than a day to hook that up.
All right, because I know that one family built a house and they were forced to go on propane.
That's correct.
That house.
Okay.
So we'll take care of this finally.
Yeah,
Yep.
seriously.
Right.
Okay, all right, just
Thank you,
asking.
thank you. Okay, any other questions? Would you like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 80 feet of 2-inch gas main in Brewer Beach Road. This gas main will originate from Kimball Beach Road and continue under the surface of Brewer Beach Road for the entire length to completion at house number 20. This main extension is needed to supply number 20 Brewer Beach Road with a new gas service. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works as outlined in the letter dated 11 April 2017.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks for being
Thanks,
here.
Harry.
Next on the agenda is a request for change of officers and directors, Packaging Center, Inc., doing business as Stop and Shop. Is there anybody here from Stop and Shop? Hi, could you please come join us at the table and introduce yourself and describe what you're asking for this evening?
Good evening. This is Keith Royer. I'm the store manager currently down at the Stop and Shop in Hingham. Change of manager request. This is my second request. I think the first paperwork got lost at wherever it gets sent to. So I've worked for Stop and Shop for 29 years now. I had the prior liquor license over in the Quincy Stop and Shop, and we're just reapplying because I'm the new store manager.
Tom, all of the, everything is in order? Okay. Any questions from my colleagues?
Nope.
Any questions from the audience? Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
I'll entertain a motion to approve the request of Packaging Center, Inc., DBA Stop and Shop, for a change of officers and directors as follows: Caroline Woodward, officer, and Mark McGowan, director, subject to the approval of the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much for coming in this evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. Next on our agenda is the fiscal year 18 Plymouth County budget discussion. And as a way to frame this up, I'll share a little bit of information with my colleagues as I've been the liaison to Plymouth County for the last 2 years. So, you know, for purposes of the audience, Hingham is, you know, we are obviously part of county government, and there is a Plymouth County has some of its own government, and it provides a number of services to all of its member communities, including the Registry of Deeds. It takes care of some of the courthouses, including our Hingham Courthouse. They provide the plane that is used sometimes with fires. They support the 4-H program. They have the Mayflower Retirement Group. And of the 27 communities that are part of Plymouth County, we each get an assessment every year that is calculated based on our population relative to all of Plymouth County. So in the last year, our Hingham's assessment is $144,000, and that's a cost that we pay to Plymouth County. And again, in return, we get many of those different services. By statute, a member of the Board of the Selectmen from each community sits on what's called the Plymouth County Advisory Board, and this group meets usually twice a year to discuss and vote on a budget for the upcoming fiscal year, and oftentimes meets at the conclusion of a fiscal year to sometimes make some transfers and things, very similar to what we're going to be doing next week. The Plymouth County budget discussion is actually going to be taking place next Thursday, and there's been an item that's come up. It's been a little bit newsworthy, which is why I asked it be put on the agenda this evening. In the FY18 Plymouth County budget, which, by the way, it totals about $10 million in all, the 3 Plymouth County commissioners who play a role that I would kind of liken to our role as the Board of Selectmen, are requesting a salary increase that has gotten some visibility and attention. Just as background, in 2009, the Plymouth County Commissioner salaries were $28,000, up prior to 2009. Each. In 2009, as part of a budget vote, because Plymouth County was experiencing, remember that was during the time of the financial crisis, the commissioner's salaries were reduced to $7,500 a year each, which was the lowest amount allowed by statute. In May of 2013, as part of the budget, the Plymouth County Commissioners requested that the annual salary increase from $7,500 to $15,000 per year. That vote of member communities present was 15-4 in favor of the increase. Hingham was actually one of the 4 communities that voted no. This year, as part of the FY18 proposed budget, is a $28,000 salary for each of the 3 commissioners. So it's a total increase of about $39,000. And what we've been asked by Plymouth County, which I think is a fair and reasonable thing, is that our board not take a vote tonight, because I'll go next week representing the board, and it's an opportunity to really hear the discussion. And I think that's fair and reasonable. There's an expectation that we come in perhaps with a point of view, but be prepared to respond and react to what we hear. At the same time, it's getting some visibility, and I was interested in getting a little bit of perspective from both of you that could help maybe inform my vote next week. As the Selectmen's representative to Plymouth County, I can tell you that about 2 years ago, in order to balance the budget, there were a number of headcount reductions all across Plymouth County, most notably in the Registry of Deeds. A portion of those positions have been restored, but last year at the budget meeting, we actually had the registrar speak to all of us and say that while there were some restorations, he didn't feel like there were enough, and he thought there were service level disruptions. I'll be interested in hearing that discussion this year, now that we've sort of had a year to go. Plymouth County has pension and OPEB liabilities that are, 2 years ago, they were estimated at $75 million. And the OPEB contribution in the last 2 years in the budget is $275,000. There are also a number of capital needs, and one of the things we heard about last year quite a bit was, in particular, some of the courthouses where maintenance had been deferred in different buildings. So anyway, next week, as I said, there's going to be a discussion, and I think for me, part of this is the concept of, when you're an elected official, whether the salary that's part of your overall budget, kind of how that fits and how those dollars are used. Again, for members of the public, we have a $100 million budget here in Hingham. Our salaries are $2,000 apiece for the year. So anyway, with that in mind, again, I wanted to give you both an opportunity to make any comments or anything that can help my thinking, so that I represent this board and not just my own views.
And are you going to be expected to vote when you go to that meeting?
We will vote when we go to that meeting, and I suspect that, again, while it's a very detailed budget, very similar to our budget, I think there's going to be a whole lot of discussion on this, not, both in terms of $39,000 that could perhaps be used to restore other services that have been lost, but I think also conceptually the idea that, the commissioners, as we do, we have full-time jobs.
Right.
We have full-time responsibilities, and our service to our community is just that. So I think it's also kind of a conceptual thing. I tell you now, I would just lead off and say that where I'm a little uneasy is that when I think of what we do in Hingham, I think we restore things gradually over time. When we didn't hire assistant principals when we opened East School, it took us 4 or 5 years to get those back. When we, oftentimes when we want to add personnel, sometimes we'll add part-time personnel. Or in the school budget, we'll add a part of a full-time equivalent. And we take a couple years to kind of get back to it. And what that allows us to do is be a little bit more measured.
And Mary, is there an ability to, as part of our, say, town meeting process, is there ability to hold line items and discuss particular line items?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And alternate motions can be adopted. That could range the gambit of keeping the salaries where they are, to something else. But again, I suspect this will be the majority of the discussion. So I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about that.
Do the commissioners spend as much time doing what they do as we do?
I think,
Just out of curiosity.
yeah, you know,
I'm thinking I should have run for a Plymouth County Commissioner. No.
I would say from what I've heard, I think, again, these jobs can be very demanding. I think they can be a full-time job if you, it can be a full-time job. I would say that in the last couple of years, that the commissioners have had to make a lot of difficult choices about the county living within its means. And that for the first time 2 years ago, they put together a balanced budget that didn't require the use of one-time money, which is what was needed. So, you know, in deference to them, I think, you know, especially you and I coming out of advisory, we know that's hard to do.
Right.
So I would say that the last couple of years in particular have been difficult.
But there's the balance of capital needs, long-term liabilities, operating budget, and, you know, your own salaries, right? And it's kind of coming to the sweet spot in balancing, you know, all of those demands on a finite pool of resources.
Right. Last year at the budget meetings, when there was talk about maybe if there was any money left over in the budget to apply it to, for example, additional personnel restorations in the Registry of Deeds, I made the point that it was a three-legged stool. You've got your liabilities, your capital, and your operating budget, and that to the extent that there are additional funds available, we should sort of look at potentially applying them to all three of those things. I think part of the discussion next week will shed some light on how that process happened. The OPEB contribution this year is the same as it, for 18 is the same as the 17 budget.
Okay. I mean, I guess, you know, if you're looking for input, my sense would be, you know, you would bring that same sort of fiscal discipline to the vote that you cast on our behalf with respect to Plymouth County as you brought to the advisory committee and as you brought here. And, you know, as you suggest, it's not to say we don't work toward salary restoration or position restoration, but, you know, it's with careful analysis of the impacts of that, you know, and you know, to me, like you said, I think all three of those issues are important, but balancing salary against long-term liability and operating needs, especially when there's service demands that apparently are concerning, then that would concern me. So,
Thank you. Paul?
I'd agree with that. I use some of those facilities, and they're a little long in the tooth, so I think they're never going to catch up, but I'd be very interested to see if they tighten their own belts first.
Okay.
so good luck with that, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Okay, well, again, I appreciate the input. We're not going to take a vote on that, but appreciate that. Next is the Green Communities overview. Mr. Moyer, would you like to join us? And we're going to have a presentation, so direct people's attention to the screen. I would just say, as Mr. Moyer's getting settled, we're going to be getting a presentation this evening. Welcome, Paul. We're going to be getting a presentation this evening, and the board is actually going to receive this information, and then I believe you're asking that we take a vote on something. What we try to do as a board is have the presentation at one meeting, vote at the next, which will give members of the public who are interested an opportunity to ask questions and make comments to the board. So we're happy to have you here tonight. Welcome.
Great, thank you for having me. My name is Brad Moyer. I'm chair of the Energy Action Committee here in Hingham. I'm joined by Paul Haino, as you all know, is the director of the light plant and a voting member of our committee, and personally, I'd like to say a great resource, and always happy to have Paul along. He puts up with a lot of us. So, although I do have a presentation for you this evening, I know I have 5 minutes, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, so The slides will primarily serve as a reference material, and I'm going to hit the highlights for you. So I'm here to introduce the concept of the Green Communities program. Mary, as you mentioned, that eventually we'll be looking for a vote, but that will be at town meeting. And really my purpose here this evening is to begin a dialogue with the town. I wanted to start with the Selectmen, basically walk you through what our community is thinking and planning, wanted to get your initial impressions, and if anything, I'm just hoping to leave here this evening with a willingness to perhaps assign a contact like Tom or Ted, or perhaps someone from your own committee, from the Selectmen, to kind of continue that dialogue as we work to socialize what we'd like to accomplish throughout the wider community. So what is a green community? So a green community is a program by the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources, and its main purpose is to recognize towns that have made efforts to improve the energy use and initiatives with their own town, and also help them along the way by providing grants to accomplish that. Once you are initially designated as a green community, there is a baseline grant, and then any subsequent year there are competitive grants for which you can seek to obtain additional money. The initial grant can be quite substantial. It's a base of $125,000, and then there is additional monies on that based on a formula that's a mix of the population and per capita income of the town. Just for example, Cohasset, which was recently designated as a green community, received $141,460 in 2015 as part of its initial grant. And as you can see that I have up there, many other towns who have been in the program longer have received competitive grants. Winchester has received over $930,000 in initial and competitive grants since 2010, and Concord has received over $600,000 since initially being designated in 2013. So what is the benefit to Hingham? Well, by my trotting out those numbers, I think the, the first benefit should be obvious, and that's we can get a substantial amount of funding. Our committee to date, and I've been a member of this committee now for 7 years, we like to think that we've plucked the low-hanging fruit. We've worked with the Selectmen, with town administration, and various municipalities, like municipal buildings, the library, town hall, South Shore Country Club, and we've made great strides. But we're now at a point where we need to tackle the middle to large-term funding projects. And so grants of this kind can be very helpful, of course, in achieving that goal. But I think it's more than just the money. I think there's recognition and pride in pursuing this designation. We are surrounded by green communities. As you can see here, we are a white spot in a sea of green. Our neighbors, with the exception of Hull, have all become green communities. Many of our peer towns as well, both west and north of Boston, are green communities. There are, in fact, 185 out of the 351 communities in Massachusetts that have been designated as green communities. And I think at this point in time, particularly local action is ever more important in pursuing energy initiative measures. With the recent pullout of the U.S. from the Paris Accord, I think that emphasizes at the national level, we're not going to get leadership in this area, so we need to drive it at the local level. The other thing, too, is that the green community designation is an exceedingly good deal for Hingham. And so what do I mean by that? Well, in order to become a green community, you have to contribute to the Renewable Energy Fund within Massachusetts. That's a charge that's levied by investor-owned utilities like National Grid to their customers. So any bill that that customer pays, there's a percentage increase that they're paying purely to fund this. Municipal towns don't need to levy that charge. They elect to. We have not, Paul, correct me, I don't mean to speak for you here, but I understand that when we've looked at this in the past, we decided municipalities just don't get the same level of support, or I should say towns that have municipal light plants don't get the same level of support for the contribution to that fund than investor-owned utility towns. And so we have elected not to charge our ratepayers that additional amount. However, several years ago, the Department of Energy Resources determined that in order to spread this program more widely, they reinterpreted how a designation could be given by saying if you have any customers in town that are also served by investor-owned utilities, if you are a muni town, you may still apply and qualify. As it turns out, Hingham has approximately 100 customers that are served by investor-owned utilities, and hence we are eligible to become a community without needing to pay a renewable energy charge. So I don't like to use this term too often, but it's kind of like free money. So we'd be foolish, I think, in my opinion, not to pursue it. So this is, though, where the rubber meets the road. So what do we have to do? How do you become a green community? There are 5 criteria that apply. The first 2 go hand in hand. There's the as-of-right siting zoning designation, and then there's the expedited permitting. So the as-of-right siting means we'd have to change our bylaws to allow for either generation, manufacturing, or R&D facilities for renewables. The good news is you don't need all 3, you only need 1. So we could, as a town, designate certain areas for research and development. So what this means is any company that's going to evaluate solar, wind, biomass, or things of that nature could, under that zoning regime, set up shop, so to speak, there. I think we encourage businesses always to consider Hingham, and so this would be a zoning change that would not require any heavy lift or any onerous new requirements. It would simply advertise that we welcome R&D facilities here, and I think we have some spots we could easily designate as such. The expedited permitting requirement simply says that any developer that would seek a permit under that as-of-right zoning regime deserves to get an answer within a year. It doesn't have to be a favorable answer, it just has to be a final answer, and that's the expedited component of that. Next, we have the energy baseline and 5-year 20% energy reduction plan. So one of the requirements is we need to do an inventory of our current energy use. And then we have to come up with a plan to reduce that use by 20% in 5 years. 15% of that must come from specifically targeted areas, such as at the library, we're going to replace boilers with something else that's more energy efficient. And then 5% of that has to be general use throughout the town, so more broad policy changes. You don't have to succeed in the 20% reduction in order to continue to be a green community. I'm not suggesting that we put a slothy plan up there and then fail, but at least it's nice to know that a good faith effort, you're doing your best, but things happen, so it doesn't risk the loss of status. Doing that level of baseline is not easy. It will require resources, but in that end, we're not alone. So there is help available. Seth Pickering, who's the regional coordinator for our area, has been a great resource. Unfortunately, is not available this evening, otherwise he'd be here to lend his support. The Metropolitan Area Planning Council, of which we are a member, also provides grants to assist in this effort. And also previously, our committee and the light plant have worked with Energy New England to do many energy audits of existing municipal facilities. Unfortunately, those would be too outdated, having last happened around 2010, 2011. However, that resource could still be available to assist on a go-forward basis. So there definitely will be some imposition on the town in pursuing that, but we're not alone. There is help.
Brad, I just jump in?
Please, Tom, do.
I just wanted to, you had mentioned the 20% reduction and the competitive grants he mentioned at the beginning of his presentation. They're tied. So the annual competitive grants are aimed at helping the towns reduce that energy usage by that 20%. so that the dollars aren't necessarily all coming out of the town.
That's great.
As
Absolutely
long
right.
as they
Thanks.
I just
stop,
wanted to tie those two together.
No, I'm glad you did. Thank
as
you.
long as he stopped you there, is it just municipal use, or is it citizen use that factors into the 20% energy
It
reduction?
would be municipal use, but it is wide-ranging. So, for example, streetlight consumption would also need to be inventories, in addition to all municipal buildings. There is also water treatment that's included. I'm not sure if Aquarian would be, as it is still a private facility, so that's something we'd have to look at. But it is still pretty broad, but not on a per-home basis.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. The fourth step is then putting together a fuel-efficient vehicle policy. That's a commitment by the town to only acquire fuel-efficient vehicles. What does fuel-efficient mean? There is the Department of Energy Resources has a website that lists what type of vehicle and the miles per gallon typically are required. Currently, it's not terribly onerous. A regular sedan might be 29 miles per gallon, which would be sufficient. Many vehicles that a town would use are already exempt from this policy. Anything that's over 8,500 pounds is not included, so fire engines, ambulances, many types of vans and so forth are already exempt. So it's not as onerous a policy as it might seem at first.
The police are all in Priuses though, right?
Not yet, not yet. Maybe one day.
Cruisers are exempt, is that right?
Cruisers are exempt, that's right. There-
Most police, fire, and DPW vehicles are exempt.
Right. There would be, I think there's an altruistic provision that once such vehicles are commercially available in an energy-efficient capacity, you would move towards them, but they're not there yet. And then lastly, a requirement to minimize life cycle costs. What that really means is the adoption of the stretch code. The stretch code is a stretch, hence the name, on the base code for new construction requirements. So this does not apply to modifications to existing structures, additions, or so forth. It's only new construction, applies both residential and commercial. And much of the heavy lifting of the stretch code has already been recently incorporated into the newly adopted base code. So it's not, again, that onerous a lift to move towards the stretch code. I think estimates say a full adoption of the stretch code for new construction could cost upwards of an additional $1,200. I wouldn't cling too heavily to that number because it, of course, depends on the size, square footage, and so forth, but it's not designed to be a heavy lift, and it's also, over time, should reduce the costs as well as to operate the structure.
Brad, do you know with the, we've requested to be considered for the Massachusetts School Building Assistance, the MSBA program for foster school, and the way the MSBA program works is they say, this is kind of, these are the specs for the school. And it's very kind of program-driven. Do you know whether the MSBA is in compliance with the stretch code?
Good question. I don't know off the top of my
Okay.
head.
That may be something we would want to find out because town meeting did approve, money for a feasibility study if Hingham were accepted into the program, and that application is pending.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely look into that.
How does that differ, and maybe it's just apples and oranges, how does that differ from kind of the energy efficiency, like the LEED certified?
Like the LEED standard,
Yeah.
right. So they're two separately run programs. So the LEED is more of a national program.
Okay.
Whereas the stretch
Okay.
code is really just your local residential building requirements. That being said, you're going to see a lot of commonalities
Okay.
in them. They also both take a very similar approach. So if you look at a LEED qualification, it's like a menu
level.
of
Yep,
options. That's
yep.
right. And you get some points for here, some points there. It's not quite a point system in the stretch code. It's more what's called the home energy rating system. But it's, again, designed to be flexible to allow builders to kind of choose from the menu of options where they want to focus their efforts to be energy compliant. So it's not like you must use this type
Okay.
of rated window. It's looking at the whole, how do you add up?
Okay, and not to sidetrack us too much, but,
Sure.
so this would be an overlay or an addition to our existing building code, so?
That's
is that
correct.
correct?
That's
Okay.
correct. But again, the most recent version is already incorporated into the base code, so it's not a whole separate code regime. It's simply, I'm making up these numbers, but it's like, look at 1.1b or 1.1a. B might be the stretch code, A might be the regular base code, so it's all baked into the code already.
I'm just in the back of my mind thinking, you know, if we're lining this up to consider for next year's annual town meeting, you know, what are the steps, who are the people, what are the boards, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's a great segue into our final next steps. So what are we looking for? So, like I said, right now, we're starting the dialogue. We're targeting 2018 town meeting for the zoning changes as well as the stretch code adoption. Both of those would be warrant articles to go before the town. The energy baseline would need to be conducted before we apply. Applications would be in the late summer of 2018. They're due by end of November, but we'd want to get a preliminary view, which they allow by the end of the summer. Ideally, I'd like to have the energy baseline concluded before town meeting. My hope would be to go into town meeting and say, here's green communities, what it means and how you have to achieve it. Here are the items we need to vote on, and I don't want there to be any surprises at town meeting. So that would be the hope. If we apply and are accepted, we would find out by winter of 2019, and we would put in our application for what that initial grant funding is to go for. With our energy baseline conducted, as Tom had mentioned, there will be no lack of things to choose from, and then we would get that initial grant funding, and we'd be off to the races.
Thank you. Questions, Paul, Karen?
And would you be looking for an appropriation? Are you going to need resources to put this stuff together from annual town meeting, or?
So what we look for is just general support from town administration at this time. Tom Mayo actually has a great deal of experience with green communities. When he was at Mashpee, they were one of the initial communities designated, so he speaks the lingo and has already been a great person to talk to. Depending on what kind of funding or support we could get from the MAPC, as well as Energy New England and HMLP, there may be some dollars that would need to be committed by the town to help with the energy audits. We will attempt to minimize that as much as possible, but also give you as advance notice as possible if we will need such dollars appropriated.
Okay. And are you taking your show on the road? Are you appearing before the planning board or other groups to start to socialize this?
Absolutely. So after we met with you, and assuming you didn't say, Brad, this is a terrible idea, go away, then we're planning to take the show on the road, meet with the planning board, meet with other interested committees. Absolutely, the schools, because they take up such a huge footprint, they're going to be incorporated into this as well. Even the new fire station that's being built, you know, we'll want to, we've already had a dialogue with that committee, but we'll want to continue that now in the green community space as well.
Yeah. I think it seems really exciting, so.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And as you're taking your show on the road, I would encourage you to go to the advisory committee and the capital outlay committee. And, you know, because these are, the advisory committee, particularly if there are going to be things for consideration by town meeting, the advisory committee is a cross-section of the town, and that'll help you kind of anticipate questions, comments, concerns. That'll help you build your business case during the year. And they typically have a liaison that helps kind of shepherd through the process. Capital outlay as well, because a lot of the aspects of being a green community, whether it's facility projects or vehicles, will
Yeah, that's a good point.
will touch them as well. Yeah, I think this is really exciting, and to your point, and, you know, thanks to you and the rest of your committee, you've been plugging along at this for a while and trying to, you know, when this committee was created, I remember we had a conversation a few years ago about kind of how do you get out on the ground floor of some of these things so that these conversations are part of the conversation and not done kind of after the fact. And I understand and agree with your point that a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been addressed. So we have to kind of think a little bigger and a little bolder. I think it's great that you're starting to socialize this right now for the annual town meeting. December and January will be here before you know it. And hopefully that'll encourage other people who are thinking about warrant articles to understand that it'll really be helpful to do that. I think, you know, Tom can be a good resource as well. It's, I think for me, what'll be really helpful, and it sounds like your energy baseline will do part of it, but helping kind of take those 5 pieces of what it means to be a green community and trying to put that in terms of what that means for Hingham.
Right.
And, you know, so for example, if it's a zoning change, what might that be? And what may happen? Because I think the more people can understand how adopting it may affect their community and you know, capital outlay can understand what it means for vehicles. I think that'll just help, again, have the conversation, and in the next year, it's somewhat of an education process leading up to town meeting. So we're eager for that and grateful that you're starting it so soon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Paul, did you have anything to add?
No, I'm just, I'm just here for moral support.
Always helpful, always helpful. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. And if
Thank
it's
you,
all
really
right with
appreciate
you, we're going to maybe forward this to the advisory committee as
Oh,
well.
please do.
I think it'll be
Please do.
good
Yeah,
for
no,
them
I think it's a good idea.
to be aware of it. And, you know, they may ask you to come in and give the same presentation to their committee as well. I think it will be
Absolutely.
helpful.
That'd be great. I'd really appreciate that. Thank
Yep.
you.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks for
again.
coming.
Okay. Next on the agenda is the Bear Cove Park Off-Leashing Program, which I imagine many in the audience are interested in. Just by way of process, I'd like to just explain kind of what we're going to see tonight. So many of you know that town meeting adopted Article 15, which called for the establishment of an off-leash dog walking program at Bear Cove Park. Over the last several weeks, a number of people, both town volunteers, interested citizens, and town hall staff have been really working in a collaborative fashion to try to define this program, identify rules and regulations that would work. We're very grateful to members of the Bear Cove Park Committee, to members of the Share Bear Cove Group, to our conservation officer, to our assistant town administrator and town administrator, our police chief, our animal control officer. Mr. Mayo is going to walk through a draft of the program. Tonight, what we're going to do is, after his presentation, we'll have questions and comments from the board. Following that, we'll take questions and comments from the public. We are not voting on anything tonight. Again, our process is we want to get this out to people, and we will have a window where we will accept written feedback. If people have questions, comments, we'll get this up on the website, and we anticipate voting on these regulations at our next meeting, which will be on June 20th. So we can recap those next steps at the end. But again, we'll let Mr. Mayo present questions and comments from the board and then from the public.
Great.
Tom?
Thank you. Okay. So bear with me, it's a little bit detailed. I'd ask, jump in obviously whenever you feel the need. But there are several segments of the presentation that I'd like to get through because I think a lot of questions are answered as we go through the program because it's necessarily segmented. Okay. So we'll go through an introduction, I'll go over the rules and regs, which is, you know, what happens when you're in the park. Then they'll have a permit procedures and requirements. That's kind of the clerk's role as it relates directly to the permit itself. And then there's a violations table and an implementation plan, et cetera. Okay. Okay, so just a brief history on the recent history. I'm not going to go way back. I know dogs in Bear Cove Park have been an issue for a long time in Hingham. I'm just going to do a recent history, a recent recap. So this discussion was initiated in 2016 by a citizen group. The Board of Selectmen, after a hearing or two, had decided to bring it to town meeting for some guidance and opinion. In the April 17 town meeting voted to authorize but not require the selectmen to design a program to allow the walking of off-leash dogs in the park. The program has been designed over the last month and a half or so via a working group that included myself, the chief of police, the town clerk, conservation agent, the animal control officer, as well as members of the Bear Cove Park Committee and the advocacy group of citizens known as Share Bear Cove, and headed up by Katie Sutton. The Board of Selectmen has reviewed and commented on this draft program in an initial form to bring it to a draft stage, and we are presenting it here tonight.
And we've done that individually.
Individually, sorry.
So we have
Individually.
not,
Thank you, Mayor.
we have not seen each other's
That's right, that's right.
comments.
Okay, moving forward, we're going to post, we're going to have this presentation tonight, and then we're going to post the program to the website first thing in the morning. That will run and be available to the public for comment, for review and comment through June 16th. What that date does is allows me time to collect all the comment and review it, analyze it, cobble it, to push it together, get it out to the board, have them a chance to review it, get it back to me so that I still have some time to incorporate what needs to be altered into the final rules and regs that are presented to the board on June 20th, a mere 4 days later. So the final program will be presented on the 20th, and if approved, then we have to, the online permit applications will be available in early July. I'm anticipating, well, hoping that, again, if approved on the 20th, I'm hoping that we would be able to get the online version of the applications up and running and available for people to start filling out as early as July 1. Now, that's the application process. That's not issuing permits. That's beginning the application process. There's going to be a few steps there. Permits will be issued on or near July 15 by the town clerk. That's a Saturday. We're in conversations with Ms. McCracken. We're likely to have to set up a special day on a Saturday, probably in this room, probably with several volunteers and several computers, and try to process or move the process along as best we can. The park will be patrolled following that by, as it always is, by the police department and the animal control officer. Incident reporting tools, meaning software, website applications, will be available via the town website for people to give comment and input and report incidents if needed. And then the selectmen are planning a one-year look back as per the initial discussion. Probably will begin, I'm guessing, somewhere around May of 2018, at which time we'll be able to examine a lot of the data that had been gathered during that year period and do an analysis of how well the program is working. So I have a note in italics down the bottom that I think is important for everyone to remember along this whole process. And it's been stated several times, so this is nothing new, but it's important to remember that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the Board of Park Commissioners, which is a legal term through Massachusetts state law, that has the authority at any time to amend, suspend, or terminate the off-leash dog walking program in its sole discretion. So we always want to bear that in mind. Okay, the rules and regs, the highlights. The first and one of the more important ones is that, this is a permitting procedure, permitting process that we're following. So only dogs that have been properly permitted are allowed to walk off-leash in the park. Off-leash walking, OLW, you'll see that a lot. I was sick of spelling it out, so I went with OLW. OLW allowed is allowed on unrestricted odd number calendar days only. So that sounds like an awful lot, but it's an important concept. So odd number calendar days was a lot of the agreement that town meeting had seen and thought was a good idea to pursue. The unrestricted portion of that, though, is an acknowledgement of the fact that there are often special events that take place in the park, and we wanted to be cognizant of that. That does occur. We're going to work on scheduling them around odd number calendar days, but there are times when that won't be possible, at which point the off-leash walking will be suspended for that time. Okay, so dogs must be under voice control, and you'll see throughout here these capitalized terms. These are defined terms in the regs that you'll see in the morning when you get them online. The voice control at all times, and the responsible walker must be, another capitalized term, must be able to demonstrate this if requested by an enforcement officer. So enforcement officers are, as you can imagine, the police department, the animal control officer, anybody that's out there that's been designated by the police chief as an enforcement officer for these purposes. If that person is in the park and a dog appears to be out of control or beyond the distance or otherwise not under proper voice control, that officer can request a demonstration of proper voice control of the permitted person. And if they can't demonstrate it, then that could be considered a violation. Okay, so the dog must be within the off-leash walking distance, defined as always within line of sight. The dog can never be outside of your sight and never more than 40 feet away from the responsible walker. Dogs may only be off-leash in unrestricted areas. So there's a map in the regulations that you'll see that has been cobbled together painstakingly, I might add, through several discussions of several different parties, and I think it's a good compromise. And what you'll see is that there are some sensitive areas in there that are necessarily permanently restricted, but there are others that are really only need to be restricted seasonally based on what the wildlife is actually doing there. So we didn't restrict them permanently, we only restricted them seasonally. And then there's obviously large swaths of the property that are not restricted at all. Okay, dogs may be up to 4 dogs. This is, I think the majority of this comment would go towards the professional dog walkers. If dogs are being walked off leash, it's very difficult to control more than 4 dogs off leash, I would think. So that's where we landed. Again, a lot of compromise, a lot of discussion. We landed on 4 dogs. That would be my recommendation. And again, all of which have to be able to demonstrate voice control by the responsible walker. Dogs must be leashed at all times in the parking areas. This is important. It's a big transition area. The dogs get excited. They're coming out of the cars. They're going into the park. They're running by one another. Different folks are leaving, going in and out. It's a very congested area. Want the dogs to be leashed when they're there. When you're in the park, past these bright yellow lines that we're going to take care of, we'll figure out, Scott, and painting these bright yellow lines all over your park, and at the entrance points, so that people know where you can unclip your dog, so the dog can then be off-leash. The off-leash program is subject to special events, like we talked about. We're going to make a rule that the events need to be posted a week in advance. We're recognizing that people want to make plans, and they want to be in the park at a certain time. They'd like to know when that's possible. So we're trying to accommodate that as well. And all of those notices will be posted on the website as well as at the main entrance to the park. All enforcement actions related to the off-leash walking will be subject to the violations table, which is there, which none of you can read. However, keep forgetting how small the screen is in this room. I apologize. All right, so I'm going to read this off to you. I apologize for it being difficult to read. There are 3 categories of violations in the violations table. There's categories A, B, and C. Category A, if a violation occurs from a Category A violation, it's an immediate revocation of the off-leash walking permit. And basically, that's if a dog attacks somebody in the park. Obviously, the dog was outside of voice control. It's a problem. It's a dangerous animal. We want it to be leashed at all times. So that would require an immediate revocation of the off-leash walking permit. There are some other pertinent situations that go along with that. If someone left the scene of an attack, or if somebody didn't provide a card or their permit number, their information, it would also be immediately revoked. The Category B discussion centers on kind of these middle-of-the-road incidences. For instance, an unwelcome greeting. A large dog, for instance, goes up and jumps up on somebody that didn't anticipate it. It's not part, it's, the person's not with that group, and people get hurt. We've had 2 injuries like that in the last year. Those are Category B violations. Dog entering or damaging any of the restricted areas. Again, we're trying to keep the animals out of the restricted areas. This is the result of a lot of conversation, so hopefully we all have an agreement and an understanding of what's sensitive and what isn't, and we're going to try to keep the animals out of those sensitive areas. And the green dock house over by the water access point now is going to be restricted to all dogs, all off-leash dogs. Category C violations are things like dog walking off-leash in the parking area, a dog walking off-leash without a permit, without the owner having a permit or the dog having its tag on it, the responsible walker not carrying the permit where they should, and all of the other general violations that the Bear Cove Park Committee already has for dogs, things like pick up your dog waste, right? Those are the general rules I think everybody's already used to. Those would be Category C violations. Now, the reason for the categorizing is, and this gets complicated, I felt a little bit like an insurance writer, but, so there's different fine structures. Category A is $250 fine and a permanent revocation of the permit. Category B is a $100 fine. Category C is a $50 fine. However, 2 Category B violations will result in permanent revocation of the off-leash walking permit, and 1 Category B violation coupled with 2 Category C, so it goes on, right? So there's this pairing thing, there's 3 Cs, 2 Bs. You'll see it tomorrow, it'll make more sense in writing. The idea is 3 strikes and you're out for the general violations. The more serious ones, we needed to limit them. Good? All right, next slide. Off-leash walking permits. So the permits will be issued by the town clerk. So we have the rules and regulations. Now we have the permits, right? 2 different kind of worlds. So now we have the permits. They're going to be issued by the town clerk. The permit must be clearly displayed. When you get your permit card, it's going to look like a license. It will have a little hole in it for attaching a lanyard to it, and the idea is you'd wear it around your neck so that everybody can see that you're a licensed off-leash dog walker. Permit must be clearly displayed at all times on the responsible walker. The off-leash dog tag, the dogs themselves will have tags in addition to the permit, so the dogs will have a tag. We're going to have resident tags and non-resident tags. The resident tags we're thinking will be Hingham red, and non-resident tags will be, what would we say, Situate blue? A blue, right? There you go. So we're having a little bit of fun with it, but the dog tags will have differentiated dogs between resident and non-resident tags, and there's a reason for that I'll get to in a minute. We're requesting photographs of the dogs, that the photograph be taken with the owner so that Leslie isn't trying to do, what we call Labrador lineups, right? So all labs kind of look the same, but if you can recognize the dog with the owner that you saw, maybe it's a little bit easier to identify something that may have happened. So in an effort to make the program a little bit more easily enforced, we'll do questions in a minute if you don't mind. A little bit more easily enforced, we wanted to ask that the photograph that's be issued and that will be incorporated into the permit be of the owner with their dog. Okay. Proof of the current dog license. So for instance, if you're a Hingham resident and your dog is licensed, obviously Ms. McCracken already has those records. And we're going to pre-populate your application with all that information, so it should be a little bit easier. For non-Hingham residents, we're going to ask that they bring a proof of rabies vaccine with them, and the license will run the length of either 1 year or until the rabies vaccine expires. All right, that's how we'll do non-resident permits. And then the retention of the off-leash walking permit is subject to the requirements of the violations table that we went through in a minute. Okay, so now we have some of the legal terms that we needed to discuss, that we needed to go through. One is that the owner must certify that the dog has never been in an attack. We don't want dangerous animals down there. I don't think anybody walking the dog down there wants any dangerous animals. So we want to make sure that that's not happening. The owner must agree to indemnify and hold harmless the town of Hingham for liability, injury, or damage caused by the dog. Owner must agree to release the town of Hingham from liability, injury, or damage caused by the dog, and agree to waive any claims or causes of action against the town arising hereunder. Owner must certify that he or she has a valid liability insurance policy that covers the dog while in Bear Cove Park. And the owner must certify that he or she has read and will abide by the rules and regulations. And equally important, I think, is that the owner will also certify that whoever might be walking that dog has also been given the rules and regs, so that they've read and will abide by them as well. And the liability will fall with the responsible walker as well as the dog owner, regardless of whether or not the dog owner was actually in the park with the dog if an incident occurred. Okay. We covered a little bit of this. The applications, the applicant must submit either a resident or a non-resident application. Both versions will be made available online to expedite the permitting process. Again, as best as possible, we're going to try to get these applications up in an online fillable form so that you can submit your online permit or application, to the town in advance of coming in to pick it up, so that we can have it pre-printed. It's going to take time. These are hard cards that need to go through a printing process. So if we get these applications in advance, we can then print them and have them in a box ready for someone to come pick up, to come in and give us a copy of their ID, which is required, and sign the application. And of course, again, if you're a Hingham resident, you would be providing us with your dog license number. If you're a non-resident, you'd be giving us a proof of current rabies vaccine. Okay, the implementation plan. So, there's a lot to do, right? After a program of this size and this magnitude and trying to do it right and responsibly, there's a lot of effort that has to go into properly implementing it. So upon approval of the off-leash walking program by the Selectmen, the following will need to be implemented. We'll need to purchase necessary material, including the permit printing machine, the permit cards, the dog tags themselves, signage that we're going to have to put up in the park. We're going to do some temporary signage for the first year until the look back, and then after the look back, if needed, we'll go in and we'll put more permanent signage in. I don't want to put a bunch of permanent signs down the park and have to take them out in a year if things go to pot. So let's get through that year, and then we'll do more permanent signage. But there's still a lot of implementation that has to be done for the initial work. Development of permitting procedures for the town clerk staff. We got a lot of work that those folks are going to have to do, and I want to try to get them as clear a procedure as possible. Personnel training, we're going to have to train those folks on how to do what they need to do, as well as the ACO, the Animal Control Officer, and the HPD. They all need to know what the enforcement rules are and understand things like the violations table and what the implications of all of that are. Then we have to create and distribute a bunch of educational material. I mean, I can give you folks this draft regulation that we're talking about tonight, but I'm going to try to find a way to get it in a more easily consumed version or format, so that the general public can relatively quickly get an understanding of what's required of them. And then we have several development projects that need to take place. Software development, so this is development of an online application forms for both the resident and non-resident, plus an interface linking the ID printing to those applications. We need to develop an incident tracking tool for the ACO and the HPD for internal purposes, as well as an online complaint and reporting tool for the general public through the town website that I mentioned earlier. So I would say that the implementation could safely occur within a month of the approval of the Board of Selectmen. That's an estimate. There are some things that I can't control. We have to order dog tags. I'm not going to order them before the approval because I don't want to buy tags and spend taxpayer money until I know I'm going to have a program to use them in. So while we've scoped all that out, we know what we're going to purchase and how we're going to do it and who we're going to buy it from. I can't order them until the vote. And when the vote occurs, I'll place the order. I, at that point, can't control how long it takes them to get me those tags, the card reader, the card printer, the card material. So there's some things that are out of our control, but I think it's safe to say we should be able to get this implemented within a month. And again, just to tie that back, if approved on the 20th, the hope and dream that I have namely to get this out of my life, would be to get this up and running by July 15th. All right, that's the goal. Carol, are you going to print that, are you? All right, so questions and comments. I would ask that we're going to post this program to the website in the morning. All comments can be sent to me. I'm going to ask that you send them to Sally's email address, just because then she can track them all. I got 200 emails a day come through my email inbox. It's easier if they're going to Sally, that she can keep them all together. We can, at the end of the period on June 16th, we can cobble them all together and get them off to the selectmen for their review and comment. So I'd ask that you do that. And again, you can't read that at all. Her email address is sinclairs@hingham-ma.gov. Or, of course, you can always mail them to us here at Town Hall, or walk them upstairs, whatever is easier for you. And the public comment period, I'm anticipating closing on June 16th at 10 a.m.
Tom, thank you. Before turning it over to the audience, we're going to questions or comments from either of my colleagues.
I'd like to hear what the public has to say, if anything.
Okay, Karen?
Yeah, I guess I'd say a couple things. I like to hear what the public has to say, too. But first of all, I appreciate all the time that's gone into this. You all can imagine, given this presentation, the number of staff and volunteer hours that have gone into taking what was a vote of town meeting just, several weeks ago and packaging it in a format that we can evaluate, digest, and vote on. And Tom, I know you've spent a great deal of time on this, as has the working group to pull this together. And so I just really appreciate that time. I appreciate the good faith. Mary, I know you've made it a priority for us to consider in light of the town meeting vote. So, I sort of the way government should work, right? There was a advisory vote by town meeting, and we picked up that advice, and we're trying to work on it. And people have spent a long time doing that. I think hearing this for the first time, so, we have individually had some time to look at various drafts when they come through. There's obviously a lot of information included in Tom's presentation and in the packet itself. And, I think it can be a little bit inundating when you see it for the first time. And, from where I sit, I guess, I feel like there's a couple ways you could look at this. Like, you could pick it up, and it's so much stuff, you could just start shooting holes in it, because it's not perfect. This program's not going to be perfect. It's really going to, I think, rest on all of our good faith effort to make it work. So you could take this document, you could say, someone could pick it up that wants to walk their dog off leash and say, you've just taken all the joy out of me walking my dog off leash because you've got 10 pages of stuff, right? Or you could pick it up and say, I'm the chief of police and the animal control officer, and it's going to be really, really difficult to enforce this because there's a lot of gray area here. So I guess what I'm suggesting and the path that I'm trying to forge on this is, town meeting voted in the affirmative for Article 15, and I'm trying to make a good faith effort to consider that advice in a program that's both responsible to the town, responsible to the park, and responsive to the reasonable use of the park by folks who want to walk their dog off leash. So I guess I'd encourage us to move forward in that vein, because I'd really like to see this go forward so that we can be in the park and give this a try. So.
Thank you. I just add a couple of things. I neglected to mention that the town clerk and our IT department are instrumental in this program, and just want to thank both of them. I would just mention for the public that, Tom mentioned that he doesn't want to order a lot of tags until he gets approval. In fact, we have to get permission from the advisory committee to get the money to do this before we can order the tags. And the advisory committee is meeting on June 20th, and we will be requesting what's called a reserve fund transfer, which is money out of a reserve fund the advisory committee has to pay for all of these items. And so we cannot spend money until we have the approval of the Finance Committee. So there's another reason why, June 20th is significant. Tom, I just wondered, you mentioned the map, and I know that, kind of that map was a very important part. Could you perhaps just describe, at town meeting, we all had a handout that had a draft of a map. The map that people will see tomorrow, how closely does that resemble what was at town meeting?
Please,
Well,
Katie.
Katie, I'm going to ask you maybe then to hold off for a couple minutes till I finish, and then I'll invite you up to do that,
I
so.
do think it's a great idea because Katie was instrumental working with the Conservation Office.
Sure.
To come up with this. I think it's very close. There are some additional changes. The Bear Cove Park Committee and Ted Matthews asked us to look at some of the more sensitive areas from an environmental standpoint, which Katie agreed to do with the Conservation Officer, to go down there and see these things for themselves. They walked the park. And I think the main difference of what you'll see from what you didn't see at town meeting was I think of it as the circumferential road in the middle of the park, which is Back River Path and Conservatory Path kind of come together to make this circumferential road right in the middle of the park. And the entirety of the inside of that area is seasonal, as well as a 50-foot swath on the south side of it. And the idea there is there's a lot of nesting birds that are in and out of there during these, I think it's April to August or roughly that time period. And Lonnie wasn't in today for me to get the actual dates of what she's going
Thank
to give
you.
me. But
Okay.
it's that
Yeah.
period.
Well, and I think the introduction of this seasonal notion, I don't recall that from town meeting either, which,
Yep, yep.
it was part of town meeting, okay.
And I would just, I think, Karen, you said it really well. I think for the last several weeks, we've undertaken a pretty rigorous process to say, how do we put together a program that allows this to work and that meets many of the goals that were talked about at town meeting? And how do we make sure we put a support structure in place so that it can be successful? So, for example, signage, so that people know what areas are off limits, what areas are seasonal. And, as I'm sort of thinking about this, I remember a few years ago when we had the high school fields project. And one of the things that became one of the most time-consuming parts of that process was the usage of the lights and the sound system over at the high school. And there were many, many hours and tons of analysis. Can we play the national anthem before a game? Can we play the national anthem and do some player introductions? When can you have play-by-play? At what time does it have to be off? How will all these things work? And I think that whole kind of usage policy got to a point where everybody said, we think we've taken this as far as we can. We've tried to anticipate all different things, and we're going to have a one-year look back, and made that commitment to ourselves to say, we're going to reach out to all the stakeholders to find out how that went. And in fact, a year passed, and when that look back occurred, a lot of what, pretty much it stayed the same. And I think it all worked pretty well. And I guess from where I'm sitting as well is that as I'm looking at a lot of this program, I really feel like we've gotten this about as far as we can to give it a try. I think we've tried to consider a lot of different points of view, stay with the direction that town meeting gave us, but at the same time, where we could, let's create a solution that works for people. And Tom, in particular, I appreciate your efforts in trying to do that. So, we will. I'll open it up in a second for questions and comments. We will read, take into account any other feedback that we have. So, Katie, since we kind of asked about the map, maybe I'd invite you to the microphone first for questions. And by the way, as people are recognized, if you could please just give your name and your address before any comments, that would be great.
Okay, Katie Sutton, 245 Levitt Street. First of all, thank you. I know you guys have worked hard on this. People keep asking me when. I know that things are really happening at Town Hall, particularly on by Tom. So thank you, Tom. You've been very communicative. There's some things in here I have questions about, but I'm not going to bring them. I'm going to write them in comments just like everyone else, because as you know, I just saw this for the first time this afternoon since we talked a while ago. So, but thank you for your great communication. I can see that everybody's working to try to make this good for everybody, and there are two sides to every story, and we need to work with everyone to make it work. I just wanted to explain for the people who are going to look at the map and go, oh good God, and don't want to sit there and stare at both maps and try to figure out what's going on. It's almost identical to what was proposed at town meeting. As Tom said, the big difference is the bottom of the loop, that sort of internal loop. We actually had blocked off the internal loop. Even at town meeting, we had said seasonal walking only, because we had already talked to the conservation officer and the Bear Cove Park Committee, and they felt that there were habitats in there that had to be protected. And we said, okay, well, how about if April to September, we don't walk in there off leash, so that those, you know, and she said that seemed reasonable. And then when I walked with Lonnie, I walked the park with Lonnie, and I talked to her about the various parts that everybody walks in, and there were 3 fields. And you guys, if you walk a lot there, you know, on that loop, there are some open areas where the dogs run. and it's a nice place for them to run together, but, you know, there's a lot of places in the park for them to run. So just that area of the loop, I think we talked about maybe even painting a line, if they can do that, so that when people get there, they know, oh, this is where we leash them, walk the loop, then we can unleash them again during that seasonal period, so that, because there aren't that many of those little fields in the park, and I guess they are precious to certain animals for habitat, so we want to respect that. But really, it's not a major change from what was proposed. And I just want people to appreciate that when you look at the map. There's a lot of pink stuff, but all of the walkways along the pink stuff, you can keep your dog off leash as long as they don't go into the pink stuff. So it's pretty much the same as what we had asked for. So
Before you sit down, can I ask you a couple questions maybe about the map? So that leashing that you talked about in those little meadows or fields, that would be seasonally restricted?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the second question I had was on the water access point, and maybe Ted can respond to this too, is that sufficiently wide enough for people to use it and get up and down? Like on the map, because the map is tiny, the entrance point to the...
So what we had talked about was, I think, a 50-foot wide access point, right?
yeah,
That's
I'm
what-
not sure,
I
actually.
didn't
I wasn't
denote
in
that
on
on the
that
map. I probably ought to
conversation.
clarify that.
Okay.
So, but we
Okay.
can talk about that.
I mean, right, I know a lot of folks, when they get down there, that's part of their use of the park, is their dogs get
Yeah,
out.
and it's a little confusing. I think we need to find a way to clarify that. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, it does make sense, I think, for what my 2 cents is worth, to have an access point there, because there are definitely points on that bank where you degrade the bank and you'd erode create erosion in the
And
bank.
there's stuff sticking out of it. So it's been
Right.
degraded by other factors other than the dogs.
Absolutely,
But the
yep.
fact of the matter is it's unsafe for everyone. So yeah, we need
Right.
to delineate.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so I will email my other concerns and questions.
Great. Other questions or comments from the audience? Ma'am, did you please come up?
Shelley Golden, 35 Franklin Rogers Road. I just have a question about the owner permit. Is it something that is going to be able to be transferable to anybody who is with that dog, or does everybody have to have their own permit? Because you could have my face with the dog and my son's walking the dog, or, you know, if you have a dog sitter coming and they're walking the dog. So, you know, there's some confusion about who then is with what dog.
So the intent is, there's a logistical reality that it's difficult to get a photo ID of every person that could be walking the dog. The attempt was to have a human relation to that animal that could commonly be with the animal. So we went with the dog owner, and the idea being that whoever walks it, if your daughter walks the dog, they would take that ID with them, throw it around their neck. It's going to be your picture with the dog, but it's something, so again, I'm not doing Labrador lineups.
Right.
That's what I don't want to do.
That was just my only question about.
So a household would have a permit.
A dog would
A
have.
dog would have a permit, and anyone
So,
in that household
The
who
idea,
walks the dog.
if you had 4 dogs or 3 dogs, I'm not sure what the kennel number is in Hingham, but so if you had 3 dogs, each dog has to have its own permit.
Yep.
Every walker that would be walking those 3 dogs in the park would have to have 3 lanyards and 3 IDs around their neck.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I suspect you all know what I'm going to say. My name is Marcia Stevens, 209 Gardner Street, and rather than reiterate what I've already written to most of you, I don't think I wrote to you, Tom, but I presume you saw that. I have and I really do congratulate you all for a tremendous amount of work, and I think it looks very good. My concern is for the Hingham residents who have limited means, who may be disabled, who may be elderly, who may not own their homes, or who may have kids coming back from college with a dog, the requirement that there be a proof of insurance or a claim of insurance is troublesome to me, because I think it almost sets an income requisite for the citizens who are planning to walk their dogs off-leash. For people who don't own their own homes, and I want to say that I own my own home and my dog is separately insured already as a therapy dog, so it really doesn't affect me, but I'm very concerned that for people who are on fixed incomes or who don't have otherwise a need for either homeowners or renters insurance that would include the dog, or who have circumstances where the dog is living temporarily in the household, that is a real hardship for many. And I'd like to see if we could eliminate that requirement for insurance, because I do think it discriminates against people who are of, how do I put it, lower than the mean Hingham income. And I think that with the agreement and the acknowledgement of liability, I think that should be where it stops. I think I may have written to Ms. Johnson about an analogy where if my kid, I don't have kids, but if my kid were to take somebody's car and that car ended up not being insured and was in an accident, there's no way that the town of Hingham would be responsible for that accident on the roadway. And I see this as analogous to that there is no liability. The owner assumes the liability, will vouch for the liability, but I don't see that there's any reasonable way that the town could be held responsible. So I'd like to see that eliminated so that people who are living in fixed income, Section 8 housing, people who are, have come back to live with mom and dad, but the dog isn't on their policy, would also have the ability to walk their dogs off leash. That's not to say that I understand Mr. Healy's concern about deep pockets, because that was presented early on, about several months ago. I do understand, but there have been no incidents where people have been injured to that extent. And as you all know, I've done my own version of research on the municipal responsibility in this type of case, and it really almost exclusively is on the negligence, falls on the negligence of a municipal employee who has failed to do his or her job properly, not on any owner of any dog. So I'd like to see that reconsidered, and I'll write to you yet again about that.
Thank you, and the board did get your letter, and in addition, we put it in a folder so that I believe when Ms. Johnson was elected, she also got the original letter. I will tell you, Ms. Stevens, I think for me personally, the insurance question has been the thing I have wrestled with the most. And I really heard what you said. And as Tom will tell you, we've had a lot of conversations and have been pushing on that in different ways. One of the things I was interested in tonight were kind of my colleagues' view on this, because, as I said, of all the questions, this is the one that I'm struggling with the most, because I do hear what you're saying. There's part of me that also, thinks that, you use a car analogy, but, in order for my son to get his driver's license, I have to insure him. He has to have insurance, and I see it both ways, and
Let me help you with that a bit. You're insuring your car for an underage driver, but you're not insuring the driver. You can get a driver's license. None of us are personally insured because we have a license to drive, or I want to say to walk, so that the insurance goes with the car. If another example that I used was now that Bear Cove Park includes the skateboard, we call it a tube, is that what the kids call it? That skateboard park, and the field is now part of Bear Cove Park. One kid pops another kid and loses a tooth, which is not covered by health insurance unless you have an additional dental, but the mandatory health insurance should cover any injury from a dog. So everybody's got health insurance, so that should be a given. But if some kid hits another kid and you don't have dental insurance, are we going to require that parents indemnify their kids against kid-to-kid fights when there's a tooth lost? The parent's responsible for the kid's behavior, and I think that's analogous to the owner being responsible for the dog's behavior. And yeah, there may be a legal battle because somebody's going to say your kid started it first and I'm not paying for the cap on the tooth or what have you. But the reality is that's what, unfortunately or fortunately, courts are for.
yeah. Thank you very much.
So I appreciated your emails, really thoughtful questions, and as you suggest, you've done a lot of thinking about this. Like Mary, when the insurance requirement came up, I think my first reaction was I didn't want to impose requirements as part of this process that would create economic exclusions to this opportunity. And so that was sort of my first gut reaction to it, to evaluate it. But I guess I'd say two things. One, and I know Katie's had conversations with Bruce Minovitz, who's the town's insurance agent. I know Tom has. You guys may have as well. I've had a conversation with him because I wanted to sort of get firsthand what that economic reality would be for somebody who doesn't own a home and otherwise have homeowners insurance, or doesn't have a tenant's policy and have tenant's insurance. So in the first instance, what Bruce told me is under your homeowner's insurance policy or a tenant's insurance policy, there is a liability provision. And under Massachusetts law, we're fortunate that in the preponderance of cases, that was the terminology he used, dogs are covered under that liability clause. And so, I pushed Bruce a little bit on this. I said, okay, well, suppose you don't have that policy, how much would it cost? Can you buy a liability policy? And he said, no, you can't buy a liability policy, but you can buy a tenant's policy. And the tenant's policy would range between $100 and $175 for the year. So you would get insurance for your dwelling, and you would get this liability coverage. So I guess you have to balance that with, you own a dog. There are expenses related to the dog, the veterinary expenses, feeding the dog, caring for the dog otherwise, and then this would be an added expense. This would be another, let's call it $100 a year, if in fact you wanted to avail yourself of this particular opportunity, which is walking your dog off leash on odd days in Bear Cove Park. you could walk your dog in other locations, right, and not have to meet this requirement. But if you want to participate in this program, that would be part of the requirement. The concern, I guess, I have about deleting it at this stage is it's sort of classic risk shifting analysis, right? You're engaging in a behavior, or you're allowing your pet to engage in this behavior, right? And that behavior is risky and imposes risk on the rest of us, right? So I'm in the park riding my bike or walking, and your off-leash dog has the potential, right, to cause injury or damage. And so the question is, well, who should bear the risk of that injury or damage? Should I, or should you, because you've allowed your dog to be off-leash in Bear Cove Park? And so, and I maybe shouldn't say this, on TV, I'm less concerned about the town, frankly. I think the town has insurance. What I'm concerned about is the other individual walking in the park who's injured by a dog and now has out-of-pocket costs because of no fault of their own, right? And so what I guess I'm saying is, if you want to engage in this privilege and you've potentially created this risk, right, we need to know that you can stand by the economic reality of what that damage might be. And one way we can do that is to say, you have liability insurance. So we know that if something happens and somebody gets hurt, you have the wherewithal through this insurance policy to stand behind the risk that you have, you've thrown out into society. So, I mean, it is pretty classic in the legal world to go through this risk analysis. It's a pretty classic, I mean, Katie knows, a pretty classic tort analysis, right, of where the risks should lie. So, we're in the public comment period. I am continuing to think about the map, the insurance, the fees potentially or no fees. There are still questions that I need to satisfy myself with over this next couple-week period. But I want you to know that I took and am taking the economic reality of this particular requirement seriously. But on the other hand, I'm worried about folks who are walking in the park who may be injured by an animal and then don't have the wherewithal to take care of themselves as a result of that. So,
Anything to add?
Thank you. I'd like to join in that. I share Ms. Johnson's view wholeheartedly. I've represented people who have bitten dogs, who have been bitten by dogs, been injured by dogs, and if there's no remedy available, it's rare that you're going to attach someone's personal property, their house, garnish their wages. You look to the insurance coverage to address your damages, because as you know, you're strictly liable in tort for an injury that your dog causes to another person. My concern, frankly, in the absence of insurance to cover the injuries or the damages that are caused by your pet, the logical choice for any kind of remedy would be the town of Hingham. And that's problematic to me. And I know there's been a lot of talk back and forth about whether the recreational use statute provides an adequate defense. One of the questions that remains outstanding in my mind, and I've asked for a response from legal counsel on this, is whether or not the town will still enjoy coverage under its liability policy for instituting a policy of this nature in the Bear Cove Park, and if so, will the town be defended under a reservation of rights by the insurer? So, I mean, I have stayed quiet, and I thank Mr. Mayo for his efforts, as well as my colleagues. That the parameters of the regulations are difficult to rope around, as has been said by others tonight. I continue to work in that direction. I'm looking for a unified vote on this, notwithstanding the position I had taken previously in a town meeting. So that's where we are. I join Karen on her views with respect to insurance. I think the risk should stay with the person whose dog it is that causes the injury.
I appreciate the sentiments that that you just shared. This has been a hard. This has been hard. It continues to be hard, and I thank you for that. I'm going to take one more comment on the insurance, and then I'm going to open it up if there are questions or comments on anything else. Ms. Stevens? Sure, one final comment?
One final comment. When you're thinking about it, think also about the potential risk to the walker, with or without a dog, of the unrestricted bicycle passage, and people who don't notify that there's a bicycle coming. I've been knocked over by the bicycle. I think, again, that's an analogy that we can draw that, yes, dogs may be an issue, but bicycles also are an issue. And now, seriously, that you have expanded Bear Cove Park for extended recreational use with competitive and dangerous sports. Skateboarding is a dangerous sport. People get injured. Either there should be a way of covering everyone who uses the park, and I don't see that statistically, and again, I haven't done it, but I will do an analysis if it's necessary. I think there are more kids injured using skateboards than there are bitten by Bear Cove Park. And I think that's kind of intuitively obvious. If you're worried about recreational use and town liability, I would be more worried about kids getting injured on that skateboard tube, and that there's no guarantee that anybody is going to cover, particularly, the physical injury, I think, is covered by health insurance, and I think that's true of the dogs. Dental injury is another story, and I think that's where you're more likely to run into problems with the fields that are now part of that park. Unless you can convince me that dogs are more dangerous than skateboards, I'm going to stick to my view.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to be recognized? Carol? Oh. Is there anyone else who has a question or a comment about these regulations? Okay. Carol?
I'm from the Hingham Journal, so I'm not speaking on either side of the issue, but I happened to call my homeowners, Liberty Mutual, to ask if I had coverage for my pets in my home. My dogs have never bitten anyone, my cats haven't, but I thought, ooh, what if a cat did? So she said, yeah, it's covered, but I asked if they're insured at your home, but they weren't necessarily insured if you take them out of your home. So maybe that should be. Can you?
I did speak to Bruce Minovitz about this issue, and he did say that your animals are covered wherever you are.
Oh, good. That's good to know. But I'm also wondering too, like about dog injuries. Like health insurance would cover, I guess, injuries to people. But what about dogs who are injured? Because I think there was a dog that was injured. Where there was quite a hefty bill that was paid for by the owner. So again, not on either side of the issue, but I think that's an issue too. Like who would pay for dog injuries without going to court if somebody wasn't willing to pay? And that's my concern. The only other thing I have, one question: if somebody walks dogs, different dogs, sometimes they change. So how would that permit be for a dog walker? I mean, just.
Sure. Tom, can you speak to that?
The responsible walkers, or in your scenario, professional dog walker, would have to have the dog's license with them.
And the liability would extend to the owner. So it would be the certification that the owner has insurance.
And again, one of the things that I think you see in this is that we're trying to put a lot of the accountability on the dog owner. And that's because, sometimes people who hire people to walk their dogs, that changes. That person changes. But I also think that as there was discussion at town meeting, one of the things that we heard, from a lot of you was we want dog owners to be accountable and responsible for educating themselves, practicing good behavior, and, being able to demonstrate that this privilege is something that we understand that it's a privilege, and we're prepared to educate and keep ourselves informed, and hold ourselves accountable to following it. And I think what we kind of heard was that helps everybody. So as a lot of these regulations were developed, we not only tried to take a lot of the content that was discussed about at town meeting, but the spirit of it as well. So with that, again, just to reiterate, there is a comment period. This will be a posted agenda item on June 20th. Because we are asking for questions and comments by mail, we will have limited opportunity for comments on the 20th. But again, I think one of the things that hopefully you've seen with all three of us are that we read and respond and really do pay attention to all the correspondence that we get. And it really does help us. So again, our thanks to everybody who helped put this together.
Yeah, I just echo that, because if we want to be able to come in here and vote on the 20th so we can move along on the timeline that Tom suggested, we really, really need you to get to us as soon as you can so that we can all analyze and digest and incorporate your comments into, what is already a pretty comprehensive document. And, now's the time, right? Like, you want to have an influence on this program, now's the time. So it'll be on the website tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning by 10 a.m.
Okay. So anyway, we've done, working group's done a lot of work. The three of us have done a lot of work. Now it's, now we'd love to hear from you, and so that we can put together a package that we can vote on the 20th.
And tomorrow, it's supposed to be a nice day, and summer is maybe supposed to start, and it's supposed to stop raining. We're also aware that this is the time of year when you want to be out there.
Right, which is why
and so we're,
right.
Part of the reason that we're challenging ourselves and pushing each other to do this is that we know that summer is one of the most popular times to use Bear Cove Park, and we want to make that available as quickly as we can. Okay.
Right.
We still have additional business. You're very welcome to stay if you'd like.
Exciting stuff. One-day liquor licenses.
We have some votes.
Can I have some water before we move on?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
I'll accept a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to William Arvanites on behalf of the South Shore Conservatory of Music.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll accept a motion to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to Mark Mignosa on behalf of the Fruit Center.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Note for the record, Sally, the dates in the vote in the agenda.
Oh, should we
The
read?
specific dates.
Want me to read the whole thing?
Oh,
So I
I
move.
beg your pardon. Thank you. Yes.
So I move to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to Eleanor Pariseault for a private event to be held at the Hingham Community Center on June 17, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 10:30 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I move to approve the issuance of a special one-day all-alcoholic beverages license to Julie Schorle on behalf of Alma Nove for the summer kickoff event to be held at Alma Nove on the patio on June 11, 2017, from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. This approval is contingent upon a police detail.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to Lucy Hancock for a private event to be held at the Hingham Public Library on Saturday, June 10, 2017, from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. This is the next one. I move to amend the occupant load at 211 Lincoln Street, DBA Comella's Restaurant, to 80, which includes 23 seats on the exterior patio. And as an aside, I think we've discussed that,
Yeah,
right?
so you guys had approved this a while back.
Yes.
It was with 57 seats. That location had been approved for 80 seats, but at the time,
By special permit?
yeah, so the Comellas hadn't taken advantage of their patio, as I understand it, and now they are, and the patio seats 23, so it's back to the 80 it had always been at that location.
Great.
And the ZBA was fine with this.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I just note, thanks to Mary Savage Dunham for that, putting that together for us.
I move the issuance of a special one-day wine and malt beverages license to Greg Lane on behalf of the Hingham Little League for the annual Hingham Little League fundraiser to be held at Lynch Field on Saturday, June 17, 2017, from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So just so you know, I'm putting all these parties on my calendar.
And we also have an appointment. We received some correspondence.
Yep,
If,
very excited about
One of my
this.
colleagues would like to make a motion.
I'll entertain a motion to join in the planning board to appoint Ted Matthews as an alternate on the Hingham Planning Board, and also to recognize him for his fine work on the Bear Cove Park Committee over the years.
I heartily second that.
I heartily third that, even though it doesn't need a third. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ted, thank you for all your volunteerism to the town. And, you know, you do all this and scouts and many other things. It really, we appreciate all the different contributions you make to the town. And welcome to the planning board.
Thank you. I was over at land use meeting before this, so I apologize.
You'll love it.
Good, that's great. Ted, Selectmen report?
Sure.
Town administrator report?
Town administrator
Excuse me.
report, you have it in your package. I'd be happy to walk you through each part of it or ask you specific questions. You can ask me specific questions about any one you want to cover. I cover several areas that we took up this last few weeks. The Route 3A corridor improvements I'll draw your attention to. In the conclusion of my comments to you, I'm recommending that the board consider creating a task force to coordinate the town activities on this matter with town staff. As you know, Roger Fernandez's office, town engineering office, along with my office, is pretty much charged with taking point on this. Although we've used a Harbor Development Committee, Deirdre Anderson, who's on the committee, was the citizen who brought forward the petition to create the funding for the Route 3A corridor design discussion, and she's been working on behalf of Harbor Development. As it takes another stage and starts to involve work with the Town of Hull and the state, and ultimately potentially Town of Cohasset, I think we need a more focused group that would focus just on this issue, but yet still retain the liaison with Harbor Development. I know Deirdre is very much interested in continuing on with this, and I think that linkage is important. Harbor Development has a lot of work to do, as you know, throughout the whole harbor. And this will be a rather consuming task all by itself.
We might want to consider putting the creation of that task force on our agenda for June 20th for discussion and possible vote, because some of that is time sensitive.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The second item I have on my report is Main Street road work. Many of you on the board now know that on June 2nd, the town began work downtown, or authorized work downtown by National Grid. It was previously a vote of the board to begin it, to begin the work. And unfortunately, you know, in the haste to complete this work ahead of microsurfacing, which is scheduled for Thursday this week, the impact of the area businesses was not taken into account. We heard from a number of the businesses. Myself and Roger Fernandez went down to speak to some of the businesses and talk about the adverse effect and how we could better deal with that in the future. And one of the things that I know Roger's considering, and he'll bring it back to us for more formal, is, you know, whether or not the town wants to require the private companies to follow the same procedure the town does, which is a very detailed procedure for notifying all affected residents of the process. So I think that's something that you'll have very shortly. In the meantime, we did meet with the business owners, some of them that had spoken to you and to me personally, and apologized for what transpired. We will also be meeting with the Downtown Association to meet with all the business owners in that area, just to make sure that we can coordinate those activities more in the future. Tree and Park Building, the septic system's been completed. We will hopefully have an RFP, sorry, we've already issued RFP. We'll hopefully have the negotiated lease for you for your next meeting. Alliance Residential Development completed their permitting process with the Zoning Board of Appeals last night. The Zoning Board of Appeals permitted 220 residential units for this development. The Zoning Board of Appeals has a statutory requirement to file the permit along with any pertinent aspects of the decision with the town clerk by June 19th, and I will forward the decision to you as soon as it becomes available. That's about it on that project. Commanders and Anderson House, I want to bring to your attention that the Veterans Council met with representatives of Father's Bills to review the quarterly status report. There were several areas of operations that were a concern to the Veterans Council. Selectman Johnson has offered to work with the Veterans Council and Father's Bills to address some of these items and identify areas of correction. Thank you, Karen. I know that you were instrumental in getting this building built in the first place, and I'm sure we can work through those issues. Former municipal light plant, an RFP has been issued for this space. The responses are due back by July 7th, and a site tour of interested parties is scheduled for June 14th at 10 o'clock. And lastly, it's my good pleasure to let you know that the Office of the Attorney General has approved Articles 10, 11, 32, 33, 35, and 36, respectively, of last town meeting. We received notification from town clerk today, and Article 34 is being retained for further review.
What was Article 34?
Marijuana.
Thank you.
That was just that moratorium, right?
Okay.
I think that's a standard review that they're conducting with everybody across the state.
Okay.
So I don't think they've singled us out.
We
and
didn't
said-
really do anything, really.
We just did what everybody else did. Now, my understanding is that they're reviewing all of them, and they're probably going to issue that guidance.
Like in the aggregate? Yeah, okay.
Tom, anything to add?
Dogs.
Okay. Paul?
I've spent almost 5 years off and on working on the Herbert Foss issue, and I have to say I was really delighted to see the end result last week where we saw the unveiling of the statute, and we had a great gathering, diverse interests and groups. So I think we've acquitted ourselves with respect to appropriately and suitably recognizing Seaman Foss for his heroism at Cienfuegos, Cuba, during the Spanish-American War. I thank the Foss Committee, Peter Finney, and John Asher in particular. I'd also like to recognize Mr. Claypool for his continued participation and his liaising with the family. I thought Saturday was a great day for the town.
Thank you. Karen?
I would echo Paul's remarks on the Foss gathering. A lot of people came out. The Intermodal Center, that new wing, is beautiful, and the statue is an amazing replica of Seaman Foss's image. And the treat of all was on our website, and there in the Intermodal building, you can actually hear Seaman Foss's voice recounting his heroism that led to the award of the Medal of Honor. It was just, it was really powerful to be in that room celebrating his service to our country and then actually hear his voice. And I know that took some doing, so that was really just a wonderful, I thought, dedication. Graduation was this weekend. You know, it was my first time getting to be down on the field, watching our graduates receive their diplomas, and I have to say, to a person, the student speakers were just absolutely phenomenal. I think HCAM has graduation on tape, and I would commend to you the thoughtful, respectful, reflective remarks of all of the student speakers. Just really made me very proud of our schools and of our kids. So congratulations to them. And I just echo Ted's remarks about the square, and I know the three of us share this, and that is we are mindful of the fragility of the business districts around this town, not only the square, but all of the business districts. And those merchants are personal to us and important to us, and you heard Ted say that once we found out about this, we acted on it, and we took ownership of the issue, and we are correcting the issue. So, again, I think it's the way government should work. It did work. We had an issue and a problem, and we are sorry for that, and we will make sure that doesn't happen again. So on the shout-out note, if you can, please make your way down to the square, other local businesses here in Hingham, and support our merchants, because they're really our lifeblood.
Thank you. Just a couple things to add. We all got notices today about road resurfacings that are going to be taking place over about the next 6 weeks. Those are up on the website, and every effort will be made to minimize the disruption. And at the same time, this is the peak season where we're embarking on our road building program, which is also very important. And many of you have written asking that your streets get repaved or your streets get fixed, and this is the time of year to do that. So that activity will start. Prior to our meeting this evening, the board was invited, and Karen and I both had a chance to stop by the new recreation barn, which is the cordage factory. This was a CPC project that was several years in the making. For those who, it's behind the central fire station next to the playground. It is a beautiful space. This offers restrooms in proximity to the playground. I heard tonight that there are 60 dance classes a week with the Funky Feet program that take place here in Town Hall. That's one of the many programs that's getting moved to the Recreation Barn. The Recreation Commission is going to be beginning a lot of their summer programs will be there. We congratulate and thank everybody who was involved. It really was a beautiful space. And the last thing I would just close on is, a lot of times we do a lot of different things in between meetings. So, you heard that Paul was part of the group that went to talk about the Route 3A corridor improvements, and Karen's working with Father Bills and the Veterans Council. One thing we're all doing right now is we're participating with our moderator in talent bank interviews. And, I think there are a lot of communities around Massachusetts right now that are looking for volunteers to serve on committees. And I suspect that we're a little bit the envy of those towns, because we've had over 50 people who have filled out talent bank applications. We've already had 3 nights of interviews. I think we have 3 more scheduled. And it is just really amazing to see the very talented, bright, committed people who are coming in who want to contribute to their community. And we are just so extraordinarily grateful to have the opportunity to meet these folks, to offer volunteer opportunities. We're still accepting talent bank applications. We will look to make appointments in early July, but it is really exciting to see people, some who are new to Hingham, some who have been here for a very long time. So thanks to everybody, and know that the spirit of volunteerism in Hingham is really alive and well. So with that, we'll close tonight's meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is on Tuesday, June 20th. So I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good night.
Everybody.